What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Poker Vlog. We are back to our old stomping grounds after a trip to New Orleans that went pretty well. We're gonna bring you another great session from a private game here in Springfield, Missouri. Hopefully we can play well. Did not play real well in New Orleans, but we played okay in Arkansas, I guess, so we'll take it. Hopefully we can have another winning session. Give this video a thumbs up. Let's jump into the hands. Into the game for $500. We're looking down at King 10 of diamonds from the hijack, our first meaningful hand. There's one limper to me. I go ahead and raise it up to $15, and the small blind has some bad news for us. He makes it 40. That's a position raise. I call it, and we go heads up to the flop. Great flop for my range, but a terrible flop for my actual hand. The small blind checks. I decide to go ahead and take a stab at it here to represent an ace, and also since this is like the worst hand I'll have, I feel like it's time to make a little bit of a play here. But unfortunately, after we put in our $35, he raises to $125, so I fold, and he ends up showing us pocket kings. So kind of a weird way for him to play pocket kings with the check raise, but it works out for him, and we're on to the next hand. In this hand, I look down at pocket kings, our turn for kings in this one. We're in middle position. I go ahead and open to $20 over a button straddle, and thinking everyone folds, I go ahead and flip my hand over to complain about the fact that I didn't get any action. Unfortunately, the straddle apparently had not acted yet, so everyone laughs, and then he decides to go ahead and make the call. So all kinds of craziness ensues. Flop comes down, pretty good one for us. We flop top set. I go ahead and bet $5 after all this laughter and all this craziness, and he calls again, which is pretty funny. I'm guessing he maybe had a backdoor flush draw or something. Very hard to tell what he could even really have on this one. This is basically just starting to feel like a joke hand at this point, but it's pretty funny. Turn comes down to 2 of diamonds. My opponent just folds. We go ahead and take it down. Yeah, turns out you don't really want to play your hands face up so much, but we make some profit on this one, and we're on to the next one. After adding on for $200 more, I look down at pocket aces from middle position, starting the hand with about $600. I go ahead and open up to $20, and I get calls from the button and the big blind, who are by far the two most active players in the game. They play extremely wide ranges, so they could literally have any two in this position, especially playing against each other. They're always deep stacked. They're always trying to get involved. Flop comes down, an interesting one. It's queen 10-4 with 2 diamonds. The action checks to me, as I expect it to do almost all the time. I bet out $45, and they both make the call. No surprise here. They're going to call with any sort of draw. Really hoping that I don't see a diamond on the rest of the board. Turn comes down the jack of spades, so not the best card, obviously, as some straights get there. Action checks to me again. I don't think I can stop betting. Maybe I can against multiple opponents. I decide to go ahead and bet out $85 here, and we at least lose one opponent. We are down to the button, who makes the call. So I'm pretty much putting him on some sort of flush draw here, maybe some sort of flush draw, straight draw combo. Not really sure, as he plays such wide ranges, he could literally have any 2 cards. River comes down, the 3 of hearts, so I'm pumped. This is not a diamond, feeling pretty decent about our spot. This is where things get a little bit weird in this hand. I bet out $115, and my opponent puts in a stack of red chips. Apparently he said all in. I didn't hear him though, so I flip my cards over, but at this point it doesn't really matter because it's on me to act and I'm facing an all in. I go into the tank for a little bit, trying to figure out if he's hit some sort of weird 2 pair on me. I don't think he has a straight. That would be pretty unlucky, but not impossible. It's just pretty hard to find anything that he's like jamming here for value. I tank and tank and tank. Finally, I end up making the call. He mucks his hand, tells me he had ace queen, so we win a really big pot here. Pretty pumped. Take this one down. Feeling really good. Now we've got a stack. Time to play some poker. Moving right along, I pick up pocket 10s under the gun +1, starting the hand off with about $1,100. The small blind opens to $20. He's pretty short stacked. He only has about $130 behind. We see 2 calls from fairly active players. Actions on me. I make it $85 to go. We see a pretty tight player under the gun +2. He tank folds. Like, he takes quite a while, eventually lays his cards down. The small blind, who was the initial opener, goes ahead and puts in his remaining $150 total. This is where things really get off the rails, though. One of the callers
goes ahead and shoves all in for $500 total. I don't really know what to do in this spot. He should know that I'm probably not going to be re-raising the short stack with a very wide range here. Not really sure. I go into the tank, thinking about it. Really can't decide what to do. Feels like this is going to be a spot where he's going to be very, very strong. Pretty weird one. In the end, I go ahead and decide to let my cards go. Luckily enough, we do get to see what he has because he's in an all-in pot with the small blind. Turns out he had ace king. The small blind player I was going to be way ahead of had jack 9 of clubs, so he was really mixing it up. Board runs out with a king on the river, so we would have ended up losing a very large pot. So I guess I'm glad I folded, but pretty weird spot overall. I think it's a fold here. I think it's pretty much always going to be a fold here if I'm facing that action, but let me know in the comments what you think, because this one definitely had me a little bit confused. In the next hand, we're looking down at a very pretty suited connector. We've got 10-9 of diamonds. We are under the gun and starting the hand off with about $950-ish. The big blind makes it 15 to go in a straddle pot. I end up making the call, under the gun plus 2 calls, and the small blind also calls. So going very multi-way to a flop, which has not that much for us. It's jack 5-3 with the jack of diamonds. Action ends up checking around, so pretty nice to see a free turn, hoping that it'll be a diamond or a card to give us an open-ended straight. Interestingly enough, it is the 9 of clubs, so now there's 2 clubs on the board. We've got second pair. Action checks around, gets to me. I go ahead and bet $20, and we see 2 callers. So that's kind of an odd situation. I didn't really expect to get 2 callers, maybe 1 caller with a club draw, but now we're kind of feeling like we might not be in that good of a spot. River comes down the 5 of spades, so now we've got a paired board. That should actually be a decent card for us some amount of the time. I guess somebody could have a 5, but really, why are they calling my turn bet here? The big blind player, who is the initial raiser pre-flop, bets $60. I think about it for a while. I don't really know what makes any sense here. In hindsight, I don't think he's going to be doing this as a bluff very often. Like, what is he going to be bluffing? Maybe if he turned a club draw and then missed it and then decided to bluff. I don't really know. Pretty weird. I end up making the crying call, which I think is pretty terrible, and he ends up showing down 5-2 of hearts for trips. Pretty surprised that he opened that hand. Not really sure what he's doing opening that, but yeah, he can take this one down, so got me this time. In the next exciting hand of poker, I look down at ace 9 of clubs from the cutoff, starting the hand off with about $900. I open to $20 after the action folds to me, and I get 2 callers, small blind, and middle position. Flop comes down, pretty going for us. It's 9 high. Unfortunately, there's no clubs, but flop and top pair, top kicker, can't complain about that too much. Action checks to me once again. I go ahead and bet out $45, and this time only the small blind decides to continue. So, feeling pretty good about the situation. Turn comes down, the 2 of clubs, so front door flush draw bricks out. Pretty much a blank. Now we've got a straight draw that we would feel kind of meh about. Action checks to me again. I think it's time to go ahead and bet again. I put out $80, and after a little bit of consideration, we see once again the small blind is making the call. Now, a little bit of history on this player. He is pretty tight, so not expecting him to be doing this super loose, but I also do expect him to probably call all the way down with any flush draws. River comes down, the queen of spades. So front door flush draw just comes right in on the river, no big deal. Thankfully, though, he decides, after thinking about it for not really very long at all, to check. I think this is pretty terrible for me. I think he's going to be trapping here with a flush a lot of the time, or he's going to have some maybe weird 2-pair hand. I really don't think I'm going to be good here that much. I'm definitely not strong enough to be going for value, so I check it back, and sure enough, he shows down pocket 10s, which he decided not to 3-bet pre-flop. He's a pretty tight, older player, so I guess I can't be too surprised that he has an overpair here and never raises once. But, oh well, we lose this one, on to the next. Looking down at King Jack offsuit from the hijack in this next hand, we're starting with about $800. We go ahead and open to $20 after the action folds to us, and once again we get 2 callers. So we are off to see a flop, which comes down, pretty mediocre one. It's 8 high. We see our opponent bet $30 into us. A little bit surprising, but on a flop that's going to not favor my range so aggressively, it makes sense for him to stab, I guess. I go ahead and make the call, and we're off to see a turn, which comes down to 4. Doesn't really change much. He decides to bet out $55 this time, and I think this might be a little bit of a speculative float, but I don't think he has too much here. I think there's a decent shot if I would have just raised. Maybe I could take it down, although maybe that looks too suspicious after my actions on the flop, so I don't know. Anyway, I make the call, and we see a fantastic river. It comes down a jack. Probably the best river we could ask for. I guess we could ask for a king, but that could actually mess us up if he has some sort of king high hand with some sort of draw. He checks. I go ahead and bet $80 this time, and he thinks about it for a little bit before going ahead and putting in the fold. So we take this one down. Nice little pot, not too crazy. I think we played it a little bit weird though. That float is probably pretty mediocre. I think if I want to check raise the flop, maybe I could get away with that somehow, but in general, don't really like how I played this hand, but I do like the result. That brings us to the last hand of the night. We look down at pocket kings. We're opening it up over the button straddle to 20 bucks. We're in the small blind. We end up getting 2 callers. So we're off to see a flop which comes down queen 9-9 rainbow. Not the worst flop ever. Sure, it's a paired board, so that's not great, but we still have an overpair. We were really not wanting to see an ace, and we dodged the ace in the flop. I'm going to go ahead and lead out here. We can get value from all kinds of other hands. We've got 2 opponents, so we can go ahead and thin the field a little bit. I bet $60. We see our first act opponent call the bet of 60, and then we get some very weird news after our last opponent bets $480 all in. Super weird spot for me. I'm not at all worried about the caller, really. I don't think he's going to have a 9 here. I think he would have raised me for sure. I think if he had much of anything, he would have raised me. Or maybe he's just calling to try and check raise later. He's a super crazy player. He could have trips for sure, but I just don't think it's very likely. I go well into the tank. The player that shoved all in is not the most conservative, not the craziest. He's a fairly decent player. Don't really know what he would be shoving all in with here. Obviously, he doesn't have a flush draw. Does he have a hand like ace queen that he didn't 3-bet pre-flop? That makes a lot of sense to me actually because he doesn't 3-bet that often. I'm thinking this one out. I really can't figure it out. I don't think if he has trips here that he's going to shove. It's going to kill his action. He's got 2 players in the pot with him. If he just calls, he can go see a turn. There aren't that many bad turns for him. He can get a lot more money in here, keep the other player in. I don't really know. I just can't figure it out. I don't feel like he would do this if he had trips. I go ahead and make the call. We quickly get the bad news. He has 9-7 of hearts, so in really bad shape. Ask if he wants to run it twice. He says, no, let's just go ahead and run it once. Unfortunately, no help on the turn. Needing a miracle king on the river. We're praying for a king here, and the turn comes down. Not a king, so we lose one of the biggest pots of the night. We are pretty disheartened. Don't know if I like this call or not. I really did not think he would do this with trips. I thought he would just call. Oh well, losing a big one with kings here to pretty much end off the night.
Well guys, not my best effort. In for 700, out for 200. There was a bunch of PLO bomb pot shenanigans that I did not include. I do not enjoy them. I don't feel like there's a lot of strategy in them. Yeah, so generally gonna be trying to skip those in the future. Give this video a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. We're trying to come back from a long absence, as most of you will very well know. Gonna get back in there, gonna be making a lot of videos. Big things are coming. Any ideas for different kinds of poker content or anything you'd like to see, please leave them down below. Any comments on my play are more than welcome. I feel like we messed up that trip 9's hand pretty bad, although I'm still surprised to see him show up with a 9 there, so I don't know. Anyway, on to the next one. Next video will be coming out very soon. Have a good one, everyone. See you next time.